right, so now we're taking a look at the example that's right underneath that box where we describe shape. And we have our place. So we have two graphs here. We have South Africa and we have household size, and then we have the UK and household size. So each one of these dots is representing how many members are in the household. What I want us to do first is kind of annotate on these graphs and talk about some of these key features of each graph. Then we'll work on getting our full description off to the side. If I haven't said this yet, one thing that a lot of students say about stats is it is a lot of writing. So just be prepared. You need to be writing things out using full sentences. You can bullet point some things, but you still need to be making sure that you're being as descriptive as possible, which takes a lot of writing. So let's get started. The very first thing is shape. We want to recognize what is going on with each of the shapes. So let's start with the first one here in South Africa. And I know this might be a little bit hard for you to see looking at my recording, but again, you have access to the digital version of these notes as well that you can refer to. First thing I'm noticing is that in South Africa, there's a huge spike here. And that in no other part of the graph is there quite as much of a spike as there is right here. So this part is telling me that it is unimodal. So we have one great big peak here in this graph. I'm noticing that if I were to kind of outline this graph, it starts high and gets low as I get to or go towards the right. So I'm noticing that it is skewed right. So in terms of shape, I see that it has one peak and I see that it is skewed right. Next, outliers. We haven't talked about the mathematical way to determine what an exact outlier is yet, but just from our past knowledge, we know an outlier is kind of a data point that doesn't seem to fit within the rest of the pattern of the data. So you could maybe identify this point here at 15 and this one that's at about 26 as potential outliers. And we're going to use that language when we write this out. We're going to say it appears that there are two approximate outliers at about 15 and 26. Okay, we're not going to say that they're for sure outliers because we don't have the math to support that, but we can say that we've observed that it seems like these two data points don't really fit the pattern of everything else. And if you looked at this and you're like, I don't think 15 is an outlier, Mrs. Walker, I think it's just the 26. That's okay as well. As long as you're recognizing at the bare minimum the 26, that's going to suffice the outlier requirement here. Now we're talking about center. Well, we haven't had much of an in-depth discussion about center yet, but from past knowledge, you know center is the middle. And we have dots here. We can count our way to the middle. So if you were to do that, you would find that your middle is at 6 people per household. And then when we look at shape and variability, let's just think about what our ranges are. Here we range from, well, that's 5, this is probably like 3, and this is 26. So we have a range of household size from 3 to 26 for South Africa. So when we're talking about when we're talking about spread or variability, we're just looking at bare minimum. What is that range of data? What's our minimum in comparison to our maximum on this distribution? There's other things we'll get into later on when we talk about variability, but for right now, just comparing the low and high points of the graph. Now I've done all of this for you for South Africa with the annotating here. I want you to pause the video and do the same thing now for the UK. Then press play when you're ready to see it right now. All right, so this one I said was symmetrical-ish. Is it perfectly symmetrical? No, but it definitely, in my eyes, does not qualify for skewed right or skewed left, so I'm going to say it's approximately symmetrical. I said it was unimodal, only one peak. I said the center was at 4. And then this one goes from 2 to 6. And this one does not have any outliers. So in terms of my annotation piece, my shape is symmetrical and unimodal. Outliers, there are none. Center is approximately 4, that's the middle of the data set. And in terms of spread or variability, it goes from 2 to 6 people for household size. What I'm going to do next is throw up my key version of the notes to see how I now take this annotated version and convert that into a proper description with sentences and comparative language. Hopefully your eyes don't get too big seeing just how long this is. I would strongly encourage you to go on to Canvas if you haven't yet to look at the keyed version of this, because it's probably going to be a little bit easier to read that versus reading this screen here. But let me walk you through it. So when I go through and describing or comparing distributions, I always label where I'm talking about shape, outlier, center, and spread and variability. That should say spread, not shape. I always like to label that so it's really clear that I've met each of those key points. On an AP exam, an FRQ reader is going to be looking at and almost like checking off a box to make sure you've met each of those criteria pieces. You do not have to label them though, and you can just write some sentences and you're good. What you can't do is just bullet point like we did with the annotation on the side. That would not suffice. That would give you no credit at all. This, on the other hand, would get you all the credit. So I said the distribution for South Africa sample is skewed right, while the distribution for the UK is approximately symmetrical. Both distributions are unimodal. So first thing I did is I compared, specifically stating what South Africa was in comparison to the UK, and then I mentioned what they have in common. That's using that comparative language. This is how they're different, this is how they're the same. Outliers. There appears to be 2 outliers in South Africa at approximately 15 and 26 household members, but in the UK, there doesn't appear to be any outliers. Notice here, I've added in a little bit more context of household members. That's what each of those values represents. If I just said 15 and 26 and I didn't specify what those numbers were referring to, you're not guaranteed to get full credit because now you're missing context. You're missing the details. Center. In South Africa, the household sizes appear to be larger, with a median at 6 members in comparison to the UK that has a median household size of 4 members. Now, when we found the center or the middle, we technically found the median. If you had just said the middle or the center, that would still be sufficient here. Shape and variability. South Africa's household size varies more, 3 to 26 members, than the UK's 2 to 6 members. So is this lengthy? Yes. Could I have maybe cut some things out, made it a little bit more concise? Probably. But you need to be careful not to make it too concise because you still need context and detail.